All right, today is Thursday, August 31st, 2023. So I'm going to be working on Steve's car again. I'm probably going to work on my wife's car this weekend. So I'll probably be posting a video or two of that. So I've got all the stuff set out here. All the kind of stuff I'm going to be needing to work on this chassis. I need to try to get the engine mounts mocked up, the cross member and all that kind of stuff. And then after that's all done, I'll be able to move on the primer and then paint on the chassis and then start the reassembly process. All right guys, so I just got off the phone with Steve. I had to get the go-ahead to spend another, I think it's like $14 or something for some ARP bolts, just a little pack of them. It was in the video the other day when I pulled the engine out of Steve's car. They had painted the engine, the body color, with the front engine mounts, the original front engine mount brackets still on it. So when I took them off, because we're doing side engine mounts, there's no paint back there, so it looks like crap. Steve's car, all it has on it is an alternator. There's nothing to hide all that in there, so it's going to be very visible. So what I wanted to do was try to tape off just the very front section of the engine and scuff and shoot that whole front little area right there. It's not going to take very much paint, but it'll look better. So I called and asked him if he wanted it painted or he just wants me to stick it in there, and he said he'd rather have it painted, and I don't blame him because everything's out, and we do have a little bit of this paint in a can over there that came when he picked up the car. So the other thing about it is these small block Chevys, those front engine mounts mounted right here, there's 2 bolt holes here and there's 2 bolt holes here on the other side. You can see right here. This one has to have a bolt in it, a short one, or oil will leak out of that because your fuel pump push rod goes in there. So it needs to have a bolt in there to cover that. I like to have any unused holes in an engine, I like to put bolts in them to cap them basically, so it doesn't just look like an empty hole, threaded hole in the engine. So what I asked him is if he wanted me to get a 3/8 long short ARP bolt pack to put in here. So it'll have because he has the hex head stainless ARP bolts in the intake, the water pump, the timing cover, the oil pan, and all that stuff. So to me, it would look good with having them in there. And he said, yeah, go ahead and do it. So that's what I'm going to do. And then at that point, he started talking about the oil leak problem. And I had stated in the video that I didn't want to be on the line for a leaky rear main seal. I can put rear main seals in small blocks. I've been doing it since I was a kid. To me, when you try to do one with a crankshaft in it, that's what makes it really tough, in my opinion. Because I've done a couple of them and they've leaked afterwards. So the only way I can get one not to leak, and they never stay not leaking, they always end up seeping because it's a stupid design, having a 2-piece seal on something. GM changed that, and I think 86 or 87 is when they went to a 1-piece rear main. And I love those engines because I've had a very high mileage, well over 100,000 mile engine, and it still wasn't leaking back there. So it's a fantastic design. But on these old school small blocks with the 2-piece rear main, it's kind of a bear to get that half a seal. You can slide it out of there with the crankshaft in the way, but I like that area to be perfectly clean, and I put a little small dab of RTV on that and then put the seal in. And I do cock the seal a little bit. I don't put the seal in straight even. I do cock it a little bit. But when the crankshaft's in the engine, that's when I worry. If it's out of the engine, I don't have a care in the world. I can do it. But that was my main thing I was trying to get across on that, because I had a buddy text me right after that video, and he said, I don't know why you're scared to put a rear main seal in. They're easy. They're real easy when the crankshaft's out. So I don't want to pull the crank and everything, because the pistons that have to come out of the engine and the crank and all that stuff, and it's really kind of overkill to do that. Now if he wanted to go ahead and put new rings and bearings in the engine, yeah, I could pull the rotating assembly out and stick it right back on there, but again, more labor, more money. We don't know how many miles is on that engine, but one thing I can tell you is when I was putting this engine at top dead center to pull the distributor, before I pulled the distributor out of this engine, I rotated the crank pulley to get that rotor bug pointing at number 1, and then that's when I went ahead and pulled the distributor. I can grab this crank pulley and rock it back and forth a lot, so that timing chain's got some slack in it. So if I'm going to be pulling the timing cover to put a new gasket on it, probably a good idea to go ahead and put a timing chain in it. So But I want to wait until it's apart and have a look at it. So anyway, I'm going to show you because I realize some of you guys, some of the stuff I say when I'm talking and describing stuff in detail, it kind of goes over your head a little bit because you don't know what I'm talking about. And I guess when I talk, I expect everybody to know some of the stuff. So I'm going to give you a visual on a rear main seal on a small block Chevy, and this is why I worry about them leaking over time, because they always end up leaking over time. So this is an old school small block Chevy. This is actually a 400 small block Chevy. So you have a rear main seal, and this is a new one right here. It's a two-piece design. This is very, very silly design. This is just not a good design. So anyway, you have to take a half of that seal and put it right here. This is the rear main cap right here. This is your bearing for your crankshaft. It bolts on there like that. So the other half goes here, which this one's still got the original brown seal in it right here. And it's hard as a rock. And that's most likely the way Steve's is, because when engines aren't run and used, things dry up and get hard, and those seals, that's what happens. So when he starts driving that car, it's just going to start leaking. But anyway, so you have two seals that you have to put in there. Now, when the crankshaft's out of the engine, I can go in here and clean this very, very nice, put a very light deal of RTV on there, and then put that seal in there. Then I can lay the crank in there, and then I can put the caps on and torque everything down. That I have no problem with. But when you leave a crankshaft in an engine, the crankshaft's in the way of that half of the seal. So you have to walk that thing, like push it out. So it's just it's going to be very difficult to clean that, and just a little bit more difficult of a job. So Steve told me to go ahead and change it, and if it leaks, it leaks. He's just going to live with it. So I'm pretty sure I can get it to where it's sealed pretty good. You know, I don't want to have to do a warranty work on a rear main seal on a two-piece rear main, because it's a dumb design anyway. Anyway, that gives you an idea of what I'm up against there. And some guys think it's a simple deal, and it technically it is. I just don't like changing them with the crank in it. So that's the game changer for me, is the crankshaft. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's not my car. If it was my car, I'd do it and, you know, not worry about it. If it ends up leaking, I'll try to do it again later. But when you're working on somebody else's car, you want to do them a nice job, and you don't want them to be angry at you for something that starts leaking later. You know what I mean? So that's my whole big spiel on that. Thanks for listening. All right, guys. So this frame, it's pretty pitted in places. You know, heavy pitting, because the 56 that this frame come out from under, the front clip had been taken off the car, and it's been off of it for decades. So it sat outside in the elements with no front clip on it. So it got a lot of heavy pitting in the metal. So what I did was I put rust defender on, which I haven't done the top of the frame yet, but all the sides and the bottom's done, because the frame, when I sprayed it the first time, was upside down. But anyway, I have more now. Steve bought a gallon of it, so I can put it on here. But what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm finding the biggest spots, and I'm going to go ahead and putty those up like I've started doing here. This lower part of the frame right here, this was bad, deep pitted right through here, this whole thing. So it even had a rough edge. So when the frame, before I primed it, I went through with my Roloc disc and sanded this edge flat again, so it didn't look all rough and stuff. So I went ahead and wiped this entire channel here because of all the deep pitting. And there's just a few pits here and there, and there's also some dings and dents in it. So I'm trying to fix a lot of this stuff. This was really dented around here and a couple of spots around that body mount area, which I'll have to go in here and sand it with barrels to get it back true, because I've got filler slimed over in the hole. But anyway, using the rust defender, if you're in the same shape, it will fill a lot of stuff. As you can see right here where the primer's kind of light on that, see that pitting? That rust defender will fill that, no problem. It'll just block right out of there, so I don't have to go in and wipe it and then sand filler and then prime it and then, you know, do all that crap. So fixing all the big stuff. Now, there's usually slag tracks on here from when the frame was welded. The big heavy slag pieces rolled across the metal, and it's so hot, it put a big trench in it. I mean, some of these were huge, just deep as hell, some up in here. So I went ahead and puttied those as well. But Anyway, when I go in and rust defend this and then go back and sand it, I'm just going to go straight to paint. This will block out and still have primer on it to just go straight to paint instead of having to block sand it and then prime it again and then paint it. So this front stub is going to look fantastic. So I talked Steve into using some really nice brake line and fuel line clamps, the really nice ones instead of the hardware store specials. So it's just going to add a little bit more, you know, detail to the front of the frame. These front frame stubs on a Tri-5 Chevy, lots of this is visible. You see a lot of this frame. You even see a lot of the frame rail top right here going down. About in here is where it starts to disappear, so all this will be visible. So anyway, I'm going to make sure that the whole front stub, the top and the sides, is on point. This thing is going to look awesome. So I'm excited. I can't wait to get paint on it because it is going to look awesome, man. You can see some of the, you can see some of the pitting right here. Look how bad this is. Now the rust defender will fill all this, so I don't have to go in and wipe all this either. You know, the body mount does cover quite a bit, but some of it will be visible, and I don't want pitting showing outside of the edge of it. And then you also got your stress fractures, or not fractures, you got your stress kinks in this metal right here. You can see right here this line going across. Some of these are really deep, some of them are not so deep. So I'm just going to go in and putty the big deep ones and then go back and block them out. But the rust defender will fill the majority of that as well. But this thing will look awesome when it's done, man. I'm telling you, it's going to look freaking sweet. All right, so I had to run a thread cleaner tap through the bosses for the side engine mounts because they've never been used before, so you can imagine the stuff that was in there. So I got to noticing this. I'm going to change the gaskets on the pan anyway, but you can see where the oil's running down. That little spot of the gasket right there, I don't know how well it's showing up. It looks awful wet right there on that part, but anyway, so I put the front mounts back on, and I'm getting ready to put these new motor mounts on, and these came with this kit from Woody's. But anyway, I was getting ready to bolt it on there, and I thought, you know what, I better check that. So look at how much gap there is on that. So it kind of looks like the ears need to be bent in a little bit, but these things are paper thin. Look how thin that metal is for a motor mount. That's, oh well, they're probably going to work, but so I'm going to have to bend these tabs over, and I'm hoping I don't break the rubber off of them. These are rubber isolated, has rubber insert in the middle. It's to keep the vibration from the engine out of the car, but Anyway, I gotta do some bending on these. Oh man, talk about frustration. So I've got the chassis. I've got it on jack stands, and like down here I had to put some plate underneath the jack stand to shim it to get the bubble levels. I've got bubble levels everywhere and everything is 0. So the frame is level sitting here in my driveway. So then once you get your frame level, you got to set your engine and trans in, and in this case I've got the original front mounts up here. I've got the engine sitting on them, so that engine is exactly where Chevrolet put it. So I wanted to do a side engine mount conversion kit, stock location, and Steve got them for me. And I thought they were Woodies, but they're actually from another company, Parts Geek or something. I haven't heard of them. But anyway, they don't fit. These must be for 3/4 forward, but they're really an inch away from being where they need to be. So they're an inch forward is what they technically are, compared to the stock mounts. So this is not going to work. The other thing about it is these are not welded on straight. These are actually angled like this once they're up there, because I had these bolted to the frame on the back. I was waiting to drill the top 2 holes and put bolts in, and I'm glad I did, because these were the wrong ones. So I went back to look at the box, and they both say shackle. So these are the 2 small boxes, which I took the motor mount stuff out of this one, and I put all the pieces off the original frame in here, you know, all the parts off of it. But it says premium OEM quality leaf spring shackle, made in China. This one's actually a Woody's box, but this is the new leaf spring hangers. So it's funny, we got shackles and shackle box. 2 boxes, but that's what the motor mounts came in. So they're apparently they used a different box than what it was supposed to have. But anyway, it's kind of interesting because they sent all the bolts and everything to do this, but the bolts they sent for the engine mounts to bolt to the block are metric. I'm pretty much sorry, but a 327 Chevy takes standard hardware. It does not take metric crap. So I dug out some bolts that I had over there in the bin to put it on there. So I tried putting the long motor mount bolt in the motor mount, and it's about 1 inch too long. Look at that crap. That's how much thread would be hanging out of that. Golly, I tell you, I can't catch a break. So I got the cross member from the garage. This is what was in the frame, the original frame. So I was going to reuse it in this frame. I'm still going to. Now I noticed this when I took it apart, but I didn't really pay much attention because I was using an impact gun and just buzzing stuff free. But anyway, it has round holes down here. Somebody's actually oblonged this one. But this end, it has a square cutout. And I was like, well, that's weird that GM did that. And then I got to looking at it, and those are not even cuts. Then when you lift it up, somebody's split that apart, and they've got washers stuffed up under there. And this washer back here is thinner than that one there. So there's more cobbling going on here. So, and that's some custom work, man. Let me tell you. I don't know who done that, but anyway, so now I've got to fix this. I need to dig the washers out of there. I'm going to clamp that together, and I'm going to weld it back together. And then I'm going to weld some steel in here flush and grind the welds. Oh, that's nice. They square cut out both sides. That's awesome. So anyway, I'm going to fix all this and put it back right and drill 2 new holes, nice round holes in it. And then I'll put it in there. I'm probably going to run out of time before I can get all this done today. Alright, so I cleaned the metal up around the edges and everything, and then I clamped it. And then I got the washers out of there first, and then I did all that. Anyway, I started putting a few welds on it to hold it, so now I'm going to take the clamps off and then go in and fully weld it up, and then I'll have to go in and grind it to smooth it. But they've chopped out square holes out of here, and I don't know why. That must have been the reason for adjustment, I guess. I don't know. So I am going to go in here and patch this with steel and then drill 2 new nice holes so it will be done correctly. I tell you what, people come up with some good cobbled crap, don't they? right, so this one had an oblong hole, so I went ahead and just filled it up with weld on one edge and then re-drilled it, 3/8 hole. So I went in and welded the ends up, the sides basically. I did both ends, and then I kind of chamfered it just a little bit so it wouldn't have a sharp edge. So now I've got to go in and cut some patches out of some plate to fit down in here, fully weld it both sides, and then grind it smooth. Then drill 2 new holes. But I think it's pretty much getting to the end of the day, and I have to turn around and break down, pull the engine and trans back out of the frame, put it back in the garage, fold up the cherry picker, put it back in the garage. But you know, it sucks, man. I got to tear everything down and then do it all back over again when the motor mounts come in. Kind of sucks.